So I say this to the militias and all others who believe that the greatest threat to freedom comes from the government instead of from those who would take away our freedom.
When government allows our military to be ordered and controlled by foreigners under presidential order, allowing foreign armies to train on our soil, allowing our military to label caring patriots as the enemy, then turns their tanks loose on U.S. citizens to murder and destroy, or directs a sniper to shoot a mother in the face while holding her infant in her arms, you bet your constituents get upset.
I can do it because I'm the president, and it's my job to make these decisions.
When your nation is floundering in a sea of phony debt, and your cities are seething with domestic violence, and you're broke and disgusted with your worthless government, will you need the peacekeeping forces today? As the United Nations sends our soldiers overseas for the purpose of propping up their fake democracies, don't be fooled by denial. These are gross conspiracies. Keep your eyes on the peacekeeping forces today. Keep your eyes on the peacekeeping forces, the peacekeeping forces. Those ungodly troops are on their way. Keep your eyes on the peacekeeping forces, the peacekeeping forces. Through force they will take your guns away. As our traitorous leaders sell this country down the drain to assist and support the international bankers' aims, don't be fooled by your TV. It's just there to fan the flames of another United Nations charade. Keep your eyes on the peacekeeping forces, the peacekeeping forces. Those ungodly troops are here today. Keep your eyes on the peacekeeping forces, the peacekeeping forces. They're unloading shipments every day. We fight. Watch the mother of global martial law attempt to make things right. Wrong.
Those of you who are here today are observing an absolutely historic event. The soldiers that you see before you represent not the past, but rather the future. It is through exercises such as this that truly we can create a new world order.
This presentation is called Enemies Foreign and Domestic. You'll get the entire version of what Yale University got about a half an hour of. The concept of this is to show you how serious things are in America so that you can respond accordingly. Because if you don't know how serious things are, folks, chances are you won't respond in the form of preparation quick enough or enough. So what I'd like to start with is, how serious is it? We think it's very serious. This is a military manual, military review, the Professional Journal of the United States Army, September 1993. It shows a UN flag flying above all of our armed services, which is what they are under and have been for years. We just haven't known it. The second I'd like to show you is some of the things that's been going on in our country. This is a picture of Lenin in the park in your fair state of Washington. 18 feet tall, 7-ton bronze statue from Russia with love, no doubt. We have Lenin overseeing the state of Washington. We have Gorbachev, I call him Garbage Trough, in California at the Presidio, which used to be an army or a military base. Now it's a UN peacekeeping base, and this is where he owns land. He is now a U.S. citizen. Now this is the man that used to run Russia. What's wrong with that picture? We have Shelley Cash Valley on the other side, the chief of staff from Georgia, not Georgia the state in America, but Georgia in Russia. So we're taking this very, very seriously. This is a memorial in San Francisco, California. It says United Nations, June 26, 1945, right downtown San Francisco. Now, to lead on a little further, this is the Constitution that we'll be going by, if they get their way. Constitution for the Federation of Earth. I believe we have copies with us downstairs. They talk about a world democracy, the rational alternative. Oh, really? When in fact, our military in 1928 said that democracy was the beginning of a destruction for a nation. Now our military is killing, or rather I should say murdering for it. But I really question if it's our military. Our National Guard is not ours any longer. They get a paycheck from the federal government. Actually, they don't even get a paycheck. They get a electronic bloop into their account. So when you trace back the trails of finance, you find out who they really work for. It's no different than it was a couple hundred years ago, folks. This is some more of that one world constitution that I just showed you the first part of there. They want to use a parliamentary system. Now here in America, we're supposed to be under a three-part system: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. Legislative would be for those of you that were to build a garage, or those of you that were to put together a menu, the blueprint for it. That's the legislative branch. The executive branch would be those that would construct the garage or create the menu, or prepare the food. The judicial branch would be those that would step back and say, oh gee, it looks pretty good, or it's crooked, or it tastes terrible, or it tastes good. So we're changing that system to where we the people will not have participation any longer. Now that document came to us, they say they're not part of the United Nations, World Constitutional and Parliament Association. It came to them from the United Nations, spelled in two different languages, to the World Constitutional and Parliament Association. Yet when you talk to them, they say that, well, we don't have anything to do with the UN. Now the World Parliament Association, as near as we can tell, have been fostered by this organization called the Baha'i International. World citizenship at its premium. In 1890, the Baha'i came up with a program. They talk about world citizenship, a global ethic for sustainable development. Folks, that means continued change. If you want their address for a catalog, we can certainly provide you with that. Now, in their world citizen paperwork, they talk about the greatest challenge facing the world's communities is to release the enormous financial, technical, human, and moral resources required for sustainable development. Now, what are you talking about here, financial? Practically everyone that's here today, including myself, are broke. How come if we're the people that sever the wealth of the land, bearing in mind that all wealth comes from the land, that we're broke? Who's got the money? If all wealth comes from the land, who's got the money? Maybe we should trace that trail. Anyhow, further on they talk about it is both implicit and explicit in a host of United Nations documents, charters, and agreements, including the opening words of the UN Charter itself. We, the peoples of the United Nations. Wonder where they got that statement. Now this is the Baha'i talking. This is not the United Nations. The United Nations, governments, and economic agencies should seek to make the principles of world citizenship part of the standard education of every child. That came out of the East, folks, India. Perfected in England and fostered upon our children through OMB, outcome-based education. Public awareness. Campaigns to raise public awareness for the challenges of world citizenship must make use of the full range of media and the arts. I'd say they're showing their colors very well. World citizenship must become the single most important part or point of ethical reference in all UN activities. Switching to something else, this is the darling of Minnesota, a Declaration of World Citizenship. This was done March 5th, 1968. Be it further resolved, and as a symbol of our obligations as world citizens, we request the Municipal Building Commission to proudly display the United Nations flag, March 5, 1968. These are the signers: the Governor of the state, Harold Levander, the Mayor, President of the City Council, the Board of Commissioners, Chief Justice, Chairman of the Minnesota Republican Party, the Democratic Party, Minnesota Bar Association, President, Minnesota Rabbinical Association, the Association or the Auxiliary Bishop of the Twin Cities, President of Legal Women Voters, President of the United Nations Association of Minnesota. That was 1968. How come the media didn't say anything to us? This document is 1976. It's authored by a man by the name of Harlan Cleveland. When he worked for the U.S. State Department, he tried to put some things through Senate. Senate released this document in 1976. They talked about creating a World Food Bank, provide for international control over all sources and supplies. That would be Executive Order 12919, which we will be going over shortly. Internationalize commodity markets, establish international control over the wealth of the oceans and deep seabeds. Tyson Foods already raped the Northern Pacific just before the EPA closed the doors to raping the lands and oceans. Provide for international control of the weather at human command. Now, come on, folks, give me a break. You can't control the weather, can you? You watch, I'll prove you wrong. Rewrite the rules of trade and investment. Create a world currency. Create a world police to keep the peace when it is threatened and restore the peace when it is broken. Now, folks, I think they're spelling the word peace wrong. It should be spelled P-E-I-C-E. They're piecing out our country. Provide special programs to teach the benefits of the New World Order to each of 6 categories of American institutions, namely business, corporations, labor unions, nonprofit enterprise, communications media, educational systems, and government agencies. So how do they accomplish this? How can they do this all over the world unless they were to have some finance? People will not work for them for nothing. Now this program here, it's United Nations membership contributions. This was provided by the Associated Press. These are the various nations: Brazil, Spain, Canada, Italy, the United Kingdom, Russia, France, Germany, Japan, and the U.S. Out of all of these nations, the United States provides more than twice as much as any other nation. And their headquarters is located on our soil in the Rockefeller Center. But that's not good enough for them. They want a little bit more. I guess the statement, more is not enough, applies here. There's a congressman from Texas, his name is Sam Johnson, that does not like what's going on. The United Nations has no authority over American citizens, and we aim to remind them of that fact. The UN is to levy global taxes equaling $1.5 trillion. Trillion dollars. $1.5 trillion. The last document you saw was about $1.25 billion. This is head poll tax. That's why the IRS isn't pushing as hard as they used to, because they're shifting. Our nation is currently questioning the competency and necessity of the UN. Now I show you this document only as a reference so we can go to the next. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. Their symbol is that of the, I believe it's Jefferson Memorial with the letters instead of the pillars right there on the bottom. Now our senator, we only claim one from Montana. Our Senator Conrad Burns calls UNESCO intrusive. He talks about the concept of creating buffer zones to expand the borders of our national parks sets a dangerous precedence. Why would he say that? There's a newspaper that comes out of northwest Montana. It's called the Montanian. This was done about a year ago. Will people give way to the ecosystems? It talks about the federal government considering us biological resources. They want to control our reproduction, our private lands. It talks about it would protect, just a minute. It would protect geographical areas based on pre-human historical records. Who kept the records then? Monkeys? They talk about the EPA. Complaining about the state and local laws being barriers to the system that they want to put in place. What's going on here? Now there's an outfit both in the state of Maine and in Tennessee that shed a lot of light on what's going on with the biosphere, our parks, etc. Global Diversity Assessment, Section 10. If you wish, you could contact us for information on this. They have an enormous amount of information, which I'll share a little bit right now. They talk about the national legislation gives state police powers to control human activities in the general interest. There goes your state sovereignty. We talk about the various states losing the almost entire use of their state lands and your private lands. In all of the areas that I'm showing you here where there's black on the map, absolutely no human use. The dark gray is very limited access. The light gray is limited use. The white areas are where we may live. So they're isolating us into small segments so they can control us or do what as they will better. Now Wisconsin, northern Michigan has a real problem. It's almost a total blackened out area, not for human habitat. New York, New England has just about the same problem in their northern areas. Total isolation from humans. But the Northwest, as I think, hit the worst. You have a park here called Cascadia. There's 14 cities which will be removed here shortly. The highways will be peeled up and it'll be given back to nature. Yet if the EPA is so concerned about it, how come they allow the military D8 cats to go plowing through salmon spawning beds to locate their sinister equipment in the middle of the mountains? Our little area in the northwest corner of Montana is all blackened out. So I guess they'll be trying to relocate us too. The parks across the country, they were showing up with these signs. Mount Mitchell State Park, North Carolina, United Nations Biosphere Reserve. But the public put so much pressure on that they had to do something. The United Nations removed their sign from the park, or removed their letters from the sign. Actually, what they did is just turn the plank around backwards. That's the back of that same sign. So don't tell me we can't make a difference. But they always come back, slide under the rug, and pop out another place of the carpet. So this is what they're reading now across the country. This is Great Smoky Mountain National Park, an International Biosphere Reserve. So instead of the United Nations, we have International Biosphere. So when you see that, folks, that's what you're actually looking at is the UN system. So how far has it gone? This is a very recent document. This is from The Garbage Trough Foundation out of Presidio, California, gives us address, phone number. State of the World Forum from September 27th to October 1 of this year. They had a summit there called Toward a New Civilization. What's wrong with our civilization, folks? Why would they make a statement like that? What's behind the scenes here? Some of the statements they made: we are giving up, or we are giving birth to the first global civilization. They talk about the different phases of human development. Whenever you see the word development, you should be real concerned with the sinister thoughts they have in mind for us. Anyhow, the opening chair was Mikhail Gorbachev Garbage Trough. Some of the chairs were Secretary George Shultz, used to be Secretary of State, Mr. Ted Turner, Mr. CNN, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Wow. What's this country coming to? Now, seated at table 15 was Colin Powell. For those of you that are thinking about voting for him, you'll know where his heart's at. But at table 9 was Ted Turner. And the topic at his table was facing the planet's carrying capacity. What does that mean? We've had spaceships landing aglow here and overweighting this planet? I don't think so. I think they're talking about carrying capacity as in natural resources, as in food, as in water. Now, there's a man here that some of us well know. Hey, good old Henry Kissinger, originally from Germany. In 1974, come up with a plan for food control genocide. This is his plan. It's showing up in a lot of different magazines. I think this one was a New American. Henry Kissinger declares the population reduction is a national security goal of the United States. Why? Now, there's a man during the Jimmy Carter regime that did a study for Carter. His name is James Gustav Speth. He is now the president of the United Nations Development Program. The report indicated that by the year 2000 they have to reduce the population to 2 billion, when in fact they expect the population to reach 6 billion. So you could say, folks, that would be 2 out of every 3 that are here today must be eliminated by the year 2000. I don't think that's going to happen through reproductive plans. That man is now the president of this United Nations organization. The Human Development Report for '94, the United Nations Development Program. So why would they be building a mausoleum in Florida? A mausoleum that's 495 feet tall, right alongside the interstate, that would hold the cremated remains of more than 1.3 million people. Why? This came out of the Tampa Tribune, January 2, 1995. So how would they orchestrate all these sinister things or sinister plans that they have against us? One way is through executive orders. Now, this has been in circulation for quite some time, actually a number of years. This program started in 1933, the War Powers Act, to eliminate or bypass Congress. Executive orders were originally intended, as near as I can tell, as an emergency stopgap in case Congress could not be convened for a national threat in time to respond properly. That was the only use for executive orders. Now today, this country is run by executive orders. Case in point, the $52 billion that went to bail out the Mexican peso. Congress said no. The president thumbed his finger up at him and said yes. He did it anyway through executive order. As you recall, during the last election, he made the comments that he was considering governing by executive order. That's martial law, folks. What's America run by today? These executive orders that you see seize all communication, seize all energy, seize all food, seize all means of transportation, seize all American people for the workforce, seize all health, education, welfare. All of these are under one new number called Executive Order 12919. In this executive order, he says, me as president, he calls this the act. You bet it's the act. It talks about FEMA being in control of most everything. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It says FEMA shall serve, provide, establish, and report. For every $13 spent through FEMA, only $1 is spent on America. The other 12 are spent on underground covert operations. It was even in the good old Spokesman Review, a year or so ago. Now, in this document, it shows various things. The Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Commerce, in regards to what? In regards to chemical and biological warfare. What's that got to do with this executive order? I'd like to just depart from it for just a moment, if I may. This was in 50 United States Code 1520. The use of human subjects for testing of chemical and biological agents by Department of Defense. The Secretary of Defense shall supply the committees of armed services of the Senate and the House of Representatives, not later than October 1 of each year, a full accounting of all experiments and studies coordinated or conducted, rather, by the Department of Defense in the preceding 12-month period, whether directly or under contract, which involves the use of human subjects for the testing of chemical and biological agents. How do you do, fellow guinea pig? This document, just in the center section, it talks about installing government-owned equipment in industrial facilities owned by private persons. What might that be? It talks about, right on the bottom of the page, this one talks about to employ persons of outstanding expertise, or experience rather, and ability without compensation. What happens to those of us that don't have any outstanding abilities or experience? If these people get to work for nothing, what do you suppose is going to happen to us? It talks about fertilizer. They want to remove any chance that we have of using fertilizer. It means any product or combination of products that contain one or more of the elements, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Well, they can have all the chicken crap I'll give them, I guess. Food resources means all commodities and products, simple, mixed, or compound, or complements of such commodities or products that are capable of being ingested by either human beings or animals. Why? It talks about food resource facilities, means plants, machinery, vehicles, including on farm. There goes your John Deere tractor. But the most sinister one of all in this whole document is water resources. How long can you go without water? Food, you could probably go a month if you take it real easy on your body. Water, you 2 days, 3 days the most, and your cells start to deteriorate. It says water resources means all usable water from all sources within the jurisdiction of the United States, which can be managed, controlled, and allocated. Wow. Now, to make my point a little bit more solid here, the United Nations, some of the highlights they've had in the last number of years, 1992, in Rio, June of 1992, it was titled the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. What does that mean? The second one, September of 1994 in Cairo, the United Nations International Conference on Population and Development. It's becoming a little more clear now what development means. The subtitle under that one is the Environment and Population Control. The third meeting, March of 1995 in Copenhagen, the Social Summit. It should have been better well intended, the Socialist Summit. Environment, population control, poverty, unemployment, social disintegration. Wow. But the fourth one, just this last September in Beijing, China, it was called the Fourth Women's Conference. Now let me show you what that one was about. The woman that was in charge of the United Nations World Food Program made this statement: "Food is power. We use it to change behavior. Some may call that bribery. We do not apologize." Wow. "Sir, would you like to eat today? Give me your guns." That's about as simple a statement as you're going to get from these renegades. Now, even the Reader's Digest is getting a little upset with what's going on with the UN. They really picked good letters for the UN because the UN is un-American. The United Nations is out of control. Why would they say such a thing? The UN food aid for Somalia refugees was sold on the black market while 50 people a day died at Dolo refugee camp in southern Ethiopia. I remember reading some news articles here a number of years ago. It talked about the UN not having any food to give the people in Ethiopia. I believe this was 1984 or 85. Because it was actually sold on the market, on the black market, while in fact Great Britain came to their aid with 110 cases of alcohol, booze. What's that going to do for starving people? No, it was meant to go to the elite to celebrate what they had done. Now these people in Ethiopia that helped them get into power were the first ones that were assassinated. The people that helped the Bolsheviks get into power in Russia during the purge there were the first ones eliminated also. So our public servants that are helping to foster this program better think twice before they're dead and gone. Now this report here is out of the Los Angeles Times just a few weeks ago. It talked about grain consumption having exceeded production for 3 consecutive years and grain stocks falling to the lowest levels in 2 decades. Wow. This is stated by World Watch President Lester R. Brown, and that's this picture that I've inserted next there so you can recognize him when you see him. So how much will it cost you to eat? This is out of the Grand Forks Herald, November 26th of 1995. There's a grave concern all over the country. Even some of the mainstream media is breaking stride right now and starting to leak out the sinister activities behind the scene. Now this came from, it's called EIR. It's a magazine from the Russia's people. I only show this because it's so appropriate to our conversation now. The House of Windsor control of raw materials. The House of Windsor talks about oil, gas, and coal. It talks about minerals and metals. But the topic that we're talking about today is food, which they control about 75% of the world's food manufacturing and distribution. This was made possible by World War II. That was one of the reasons for World War II, for total domination. It includes companies such as Continental, Cargill, ones that we're familiar with, Archer Daniels, Midland. They've got just about everything. They've got Nabisco, they've got General Mills, Pillsbury. There's hardly a company left in this country that they don't have. But this has been through long and sinister plans from way back when. Now this document was sent to us by a truck driver hauling food in an underground secured military base in America. This is one of 52 that we know of. This is for FEMA. The top picture shows the hood of a semi at the base of it, right down here. It's the passenger that took the picture. The top is a tree line, and in the center of the top, coming out of the black hole, is a semi coming at him. Now the bottom picture shows this same semi meeting another semi underground, coming at him in the tunnel. But the strange thing is there's an intersection there, and if you'll follow the tracks across, you'll see the back of another semi underground. This one came to us by a driver from North Dakota. Now this food issue shows up everywhere. This is the back of a Kick cereal box, 1993-94. It has the 10 regions in it, just like the map, or just like the movie America with a K. 1986, ABC Television had a 15-hour, 7-part series called America. It starred Chris Christopherson and a number of other actors. it homed in on something called Heartland America. Now, Heartland America in the 50s could have fed the world twice over. In the 70s, it was about 90% of the world's grain export. Now, here in the 90s, we can't even feed ourselves. What happened, folks? How come we can't? Now, this program, Heartland America, is where the movie homed in on. Heartland America. Now, I want to show you a little further how the military gets involved with Heartland America. This is a 1994, I guess it was May of 1994, military document called Partnership States Bridge to America. What's that old phrase we hear, a way shall be made for the kings of the East? Well, here it is, folks. Here's the document. This is out of the Department of the Army and the Air Force, May 15, 1994. For instance, if you're from California, you get transferred to the Ukraine and vice versa. Does anybody remember history from 1929 to 1931 during the purge of the Ukraine? 10 million plus people died of starvation, and most of those that died were the plain old ordinary farmers, those that refused to be part of the collective farms. Today you'd call that the corporate farm. They grew the grain. They were the heartland of Europe. They grew the grain for Europe, yet they died of starvation. Why? Because there was no control over these folks. They were independent cusses like we are. But the last page on this whole document is the most sinister. Right here, it shows involving Russia directly with Heartland America. That's what the movie was all about, folks, on ABC television in 1986. It showed the black helicopters coming in. It showed people eating out of the back of a military deuce and a half. It showed Russian control. Now, for those of you that think that communism is dead, why don't you tell that to the Chechens that lie dead? They took them at their word. Communism is over. No, the Berlin Wall fell at the push of a finger from the other side, not this side. Something's wrong with that picture. Now, just the other day, Poland voted communism back in again so they could eat. Food control is people control. And the 17th or 18th, it is, of this month, all of Russia votes on it again. Where do you think they're going to go? They're going to go back to communism. They've got the same kind of election systems as we have here. You know, the people that build our voting machines are the same people that build our gambling machines, but we have better luck in Vegas, probably. Now, this is a United Nations document that Robert Fletcher got when he was working with us as an investigator. It's to the militia of Montana. On the bottom of this document, it's from the United Nations, by the way, sent directly to us. On the bottom of the document, it says, "Your request. Please find enclosed a copy of the certified true copy of the Convention of the Prohibition of Military and Other Hostile Use of Environmental Modification Techniques." Whoa. So let me show you how far this has gone. We put out a document in July of this year about weather modification. We addressed the U.S. Senate in June about weather modification. We were on Nightline in May about weather modification, and they all poo-pooed it. Oh, them dummies from Montana. Now, this is a September release of Popular Science. But, of course, they believe mainstream media, just not us. I believe Popular Science did this to try to perhaps cover things up a little bit because we had taken the cat out of the bag, and they tried to put it back in. It talks about hurricane alert, killer storms are coming. How do they know how many are coming? They almost guessed it to the storm. What do they do? Dial it in? The bottom of this cover of this article talks about an exclusive, the secret agenda of the military project in Alaska. Well, I want to get into both of those, folks, but first we're going to go over just a little bit on the hurricanes, etc. This was the front cover to the hurricane section in this article. This is basically how hurricanes are formed, by hot and cold rise and fall, causing the circulation. The hotter they get it, the more they have. The more they cool it off, the less turbulence, less problems they have coming across from the African shores to America. Well, what would happen if there was a way to heat this water, to make things more turbulent? Now this program right here, here's the beginning page to it. It shows Saddam Hussein. The next document here is the first page entry, Mystery in Alaska. It talks about the little-known Pentagon-sponsored radio physics program or project called HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. In this document, they talk about weather modification. Wow. How can this possibly be? Now, this is mainstream American literature, not these wackos from Montana. This document shows the diagrams of how they do it. It also talks about, right at the bottom of this first column, it says weather manipulation made possible by holding or building ionospheric heaters. Hot and cold, rise and fall. How about that? These programs, or these two articles that they put in here, work very nicely together to expose what they're really up to change the world's weather. It talks about could induce local weather conditions such as floods or droughts. My wife and I were on talk radio, and during a commercial we had heard, listening to the U.S. Commodities Exchange talking, and they were talking about the southern hemisphere having a tremendous drought. Only half of it got planted this year, and the half that got planted is without water. So what do we have to look forward to, folks? It talks about the use for military operations to smooth seas that might suddenly be raised by treacherous squalls, creating or denying a tactical advantage. So there's all kinds of reasons for this program. Now this program comes out of Alaska. They had an open house up there. We perceived to put the cat back in the bag when in fact we had a willing soul up there that we helped fund him to get the program going, but he went in and did his own investigation for us. These are some of the pictures that he took. Now that he was up there and took the pictures, the rest of the cats got out of the bag. Ha, ha, ha. This is the HAARP program in Gracona, Alaska. On the bottom of this page, you'll see this office building, normal height. The people are just tiny, tiny. These towers are 72 feet tall, all over this area. I want to get into how serious these programs are. This is from the Department of the Air Force to one of us here in Montana. We couldn't tell him just exactly, couldn't tell you just exactly who it is, for fear of losing the correspondence. You asked if the information in the militiaman's newsletter, which we had printed a while back, was true. It is true that the Department of Defense is developing a site near the village of Gracona. The site is for our HAARP program, which is a research project to better understand the ionosphere and, in part, its effects on communication. Oh, really? Now, these programs that they're talking about tie into all the little programs across the country called GWEN, Ground Wave Emergency Network. These ground wave towers, every couple hundred miles or so, say they're for early warning systems in America, when in fact they're 80 times slower than our fax machine. Folks, we're in trouble. Our fax machine's pretty slow. The people that printed this article are called NOHAARP. HAARP is a joint effort of the Air Force and the Navy. Heaters that can already be changing the weather. Migratory species traveling through the rays have already experienced irreversible change. How many humans have contacted cancer that might have remained dormant if not excited by these transmitters? The Department of Defense documents indicate the interference problems would be too great to allow it to be located near other military facilities in Alaska. Oh, it's okay to do it to us, but they won't even do it to their own bases, huh? The electromagnetic radiation has drawn increasing interest in the form of health impact studies and research worldwide. The HAARP project will generate massive amounts of intentional and some unintentional radiation. Studies indicate that there can be promotion of cancer growth, disorientation, and other negative physical effects. Wow. So what exactly is HAARP? What will it do? It'll destroy the communication capabilities of others while preserving its own communications. How do we survive in trouble without communications, folks? The Alaska location was particularly picked for its alignment with the Earth's magnetic force lines. Military experiments with the megasphere also appear to be planned. And again, the scientists warn of possible dire consequences. Like what? Including setting the Earth into some unexpected vibration or oscillation, similar to an axis wobble. Will stop the world and let me off? I don't think so. Those of us of no HAARP are committed to doing what we can to stop the project before it comes online in full power in 1997. Now, there's another newspaper that comes out from up there. It's called Brush Blade. Some of you that have hung around in Alaska may be aware of this. The very first paragraph talks about blinded pilots, irritated passengers. Wow. How far will your airline fly with a blinded pilot? Well, one of the most curious things out of this document, according to Gerald Markey, manager for the FAA Spectrum Engineering, we expect HAARP to interfere with navigation aids, VHF counter-directional range, global positioning systems, and instrument landing beacons, VHF and UHF. By the time it's all said and done, our VHF, our UHF, our shortwave, our CB, our sideband will not function, folks. Only their 800 bands. And our 800 bands, which run our cellular phones, can be shut off at the push of 2 buttons. The whole nation. But as if that's not enough, our military has the same program, which they perfected over Kuwait and Iraq. It's called the America's Persuader in the Sky. It's from the Department of Defense. It talks about to jam a country's TV and radio broadcast and substitute messages. How will you know what you're watching is true and came from the correct source? And they can do it on any frequency they choose. It was tested during the Persian Gulf War. Now that's not the only one. FEMA has their own little program. This was a RC-130. FEMA has a E-4B made by Boeing. This document here is a new set of towers they're putting across America every 200 miles to eliminate the need of the regular communication system. We believe this will be made available to the military across the country. Now this is the person that made us aware of this. She talks about, I am very concerned with the foundation with which our beloved country was built. It is crumbling. And everywhere I go, old and young, rich and poor, black and white, Republicans, Democrats, Independents are all whispering of what some believe is the subtle, calculated takeover of our country by force, which screams of peace, while equipping foreign troops with laser beams that beep when a kill is made. The facilities are springing up across the U.S. every 200 miles, permitted through the Department of Transportation, flagged as FAA complexes. Now here's the funding for that program. Right out of the Senate, right out of Congress, the United States Senate. It talks about authorizing appropriations for fiscal year 1995 for military activities for the Department of Defense for military construction. In one of the pages it talks about the HARP program, High Frequency Active Auroral Research. It talks about could allow Earth penetration technology over most of the northern hemisphere from this one plant in Alaska. Such a capability would permit the detection of precise locations of tunnel shelters and other underground shelters. Wow. It talks about a $90 million cost to get it online while they're cutting welfare programs, etc. Now there's a book that we have. It's called Angels Don't Play This HARP. It gives in much greater detail the quick story that I just gave you. Just the other day, while we were reviewing this program for presentation, we got a phone call from a friend of ours that had been involved in logging in Alaska. December 9th, 1995, Soldotna, Alaska, received call concerning HARP information. Computers and logging equipment lost memory. Computer technicians could not repair. One technician called the telephone company to see if they had problems. Telephone company informed the technician that yes, they too were having problems. When asked if they knew what caused the problem, the telephone company responded with, a secret government project near Gracona had emitted a huge EMP, electromagnetic pulse, causing the computers to lose all memory. Wow. On the 12th of December, we had the strange storm sweep through from the west coast. Now this document, which was printed in beautiful UN blue by the U.S. Government Printing Office, is called Blueprint for the Peace Race. What in the world does that mean? Can you hear me all right back there? Blueprint for the Peace Race. General and complete disarmament in a peaceful world. I think they spelled the word wrong again, folks. Now this is President Kennedy talking, September 25, 1961. Not to an arms race, but to a peace race. How do you race for peace? How do you do that? To advance together, step by step, stage by stage, until general and complete disarmament has been achieved. This is another one of their dirty documents. The United States Program for General and Complete Disarmament in a Peaceful World. This was released the same month by the printing office that President Kennedy made that statement. For sale by the Superintendent of Documents, U.S. Government Printing Office, Washington, 25, D.C. Freedom from War. This is inside that the context of that book. It talks about the disbanding of all national armed forces and the prohibition, like in No-No, of their reestablishment in any form whatsoever, other than those required to preserve internal order and for contributions to a United Nations peace force. The third stage of this development program, which we're in the middle of right now, talks about manpower for a UN peace force. It talks about the manufacture of armaments would be prohibited, except all other armaments would be destroyed or converted to peaceful purposes. Yeah, like what? Here's your peaceful purpose, folks. Make reefs, not war. While they dump our armored personnel carriers perfectly good into the ocean to make barrier reefs for fish, if they wanted to do that, they could do it with automobiles. Yet they're taking our older cars out of the junkyards, giving them a reward for taking them away and crushing them, so we have no way to repair the old iron. They could be dropping those. One of these make 10 cars. Why aren't they recycling these? So how do they get our military boys to go along with this? This is the Army War College, Washington, D.C. This is what they're teaching our troops now, our officers, our leaders. Peacemaking, peacekeeping, and coalition warfare. The future role of the United Nations. This is taught right in our own colleges here in America. That's Norwich University. Inside of that document, the reference page, and we have the whole book on it. United Nations peacekeeping, relationship between civilian and military components. Folks, it's all going to be Force 2000. There's not going to be military, there's not going to be police, they'll all be the same. This document goes on to talk about the environment of regional security apparatus for the gray domain. What the heck does that mean? Maneuvering in the gray zone. What is that, between the zone of good and evil? Here's another one of the military review manuals, which is a prestigious magazine that goes to about the top 20% of the officers. This is December 1992. It shows how all roads lead to the United Nations. The breakup of the hammer and sickle, yeah, right. They just dismantled it so they could ship it over here, and I'll show you. You know that NATO and the Warsaw Pacts have all been under the United Nations for many years, since their inception. One was for Western Europe, the other was for Eastern Europe. Now this program here, Civil Affairs Operations, came out of a military field manual called 41-10. They talk about distribution restrictions, destruction notice, destroy by any method that will prevent disclosure of contents or reconstruction of the document. Well, folks, I am here to tell you we've got it. On page 13-2, there are some eerie words to behold. Mobile warfare or war of movement. The bottom of the page talks about phases of insurgency. Up the sides of the diagram or of the pyramid, it talks about preparation of resistance cadres and mobilization of population. Now this is military talking. Preparation of parallel hierarchies to take over government posts. Is that why Alexander Haig did what he did? When, was it Reagan that was shot? When he leaped to power himself, thought that he could grab the reins? He was just going under military directives now, wasn't he? But this pyramid shows the takeover of a nation. They just don't say it's the United States. Yet everything that they're applying here relates to the United States. Like, for instance, the bottom of the first stage of insurgency, dissatisfaction with political, economical, administrative, and other conditions. I can't find one American that'll argue with that. Not one. The beginning of the second stage, which would be right up here, intensification of propaganda, psychological preparation of population for rebellion. Wait a minute, I don't think so. We want our country put back together. We do not want a rebellion. Our public servants have already rebelled. They've shot a mother in the face, her son in the back, burned babies at the stake in Waco. When it's against the law through the Posse Comitatus Act to use military on civilians here in America, our public servants broke the law and are out of control. That's why we have rebellion now. They're our servants, folks. But the last of all these stages is the most curious. It talks about right on the top the above ground activities, minor guerrilla actions and major guerrilla actions. This is military talk. So is that why we have a scheme like this? This came out of a Sacramento newspaper in May of 1994. We have the entire document, 20 pages, written by this man by the name of Ralph Peters. He's a major for the Pentagon. He's called their threat assessment officer. They talk about people like myself being warriors, erratic primitives of shifting allegiance. No, we pledge allegiance. We didn't shift. It talks about the U.S. soldiers are unprepared for the absolute mercilessness which modern warriors are capable and are discouraged or forbidden from replying in kind. I remember what happened at Waco and what happened at Ruby Ridge. They were the villains that murdered these trained mercenaries. He also goes on to talk about these warriors come from four pools. The underclass. Well, who in the world made us underclass? Remember the now you see it, now you don't elastic dollar? If all wealth comes from the earth, How come we don't have any? We're the serfs that sever it. It talks about young males. What chance do they have to put a family together the way it was intended in America, a family unit? They have no chance anymore. What have we left our children and grandchildren? It talks about Gentry and patriots as a threat. You bet we're a threat. It talks about cashiered military men. Look at Michael New being court-martialed for not wanting to put on the UN rag. I'm all for it. But the most interesting thing of all is at the bottom of the last paragraph. It says an active campaign to win over the populace. Huh? From what to what? Why? And how will they do it? Through burnings and bombings and biochem? Perhaps. May 26th of this year, El Presidente Clintonista made the comment that the potential existed for chemical biological terrorism here in America. Remember, folks, he was making those statements before the bombs went off in Oklahoma, too. And lo and behold, we had bombs. Now this man, Ted L. Gunderson, made an entire book about the bombs in Oklahoma. Here's the book. A very unique documentation on what's really going on out there. He's a former FBI chief. His last assignment was in Los Angeles, California. He had 700 men under him, an annual budget of $22 million. So the guy should know what he's talking about. He's put his reputation on the line by building this book to show America what's really going on. This man has a burning concern for his country. So far, he's the only competition Clinton has in the Democratic Party. He's running for president, folks. Not that he's the only good one out there running. The Republican Party has several. This is the man that did the analysis on the Oklahoma bombs from the seismic center at the Norman, Oklahoma College, which is about 16 miles away from the epicenter. He donated this documentation to Ted Gunderson to put in his book. This is basically what it says. This is the seismic printout of the bombs. The first one you see, reading from left to right, would be the truck bomb. At approximately 9:02, at 9:02 and 4 seconds, an inside bomb. At 9:02 and 10 seconds, another bomb. But that's not the only report that we have. We also have it from the Omniplex Center, which was about 6 or 7 miles away. This is what it looked like. The first one's the outside bomb. The second one is the inside, and the next also the inside. You'd have to ask yourself some very pertinent questions right about here, remembering the Twin Towers in New York and the faces of the people that came out of there gasping for air, blackened with soot all over their faces. How come you didn't see this in Oklahoma? If this was a fertilizer bomb, it should have been identical. How come there was none? And the second thing you'd have to ask, if this was the only bomb, how come pillars that should have been blown that were closer to the truck were still standing? And those that are very, very far away were taken out. Yet those pillars that were close still had the sheetrock hanging on them. It takes 30,000 psi to blow a pillar over. It takes 30 psi to take the sheetrock off, so what was the sheetrock doing there? It does not compute. Also, the director of the Department of Agriculture, which was one of the first survivors that was interviewed, said, "I thought it was an earthquake, so I got under my desk. Then the glass came past." I think that's backwards. Isn't glass the weakest part of the structure? So what happened? Anyhow, we, through our attorney, Senator John DeCamp, attempted to get a stay of execution of the remains of the building or a court injunction to stop the demolition. The harder we pushed, the faster the building came down. Now, I'm not saying the government blew up the building, but they sure as heck destroyed the evidence. They hauled it out of town, they put a barricade around it, and put armed guards on it. Folks, what were they hiding? What's wrong with this picture? Now, this document here is prepared by a retired brigadier general from the Air Force, whose expertise was demolition and terrorist analysis. Mr. Parton is his name. He talks about, to produce the resultant damage pattern on the building, there would have to have been an effect with demolition charges at column bases to complement the supplement the truck bombing damage. That's pretty brave of him, isn't it? And this is the type of damage that he's talking about. It shows the circles of energy going away from the truck, and pillars that should have been demolished are still standing. Pillars that should be standing are demolished. Yet the pillar next to the ones that were taken out still have the sheetrock on them. Why? He also makes some very staggering statements. Now, how come the normal media doesn't tell us these things? Why not? His statement is, the payoff to the leftists' international implementation of World Commonwealth of Independent States as a prelude to the withering away of the state would merit highest level planning and implementation of the Oklahoma bombing if it could result in a new legislation to criminalize the patriotic support of constitutional rights. Wow. This is a newspaper clipping, June 11th, 1995. It's done by a man by the name of Arnold Hamilton. He's with the Dallas Morning News. He's their chief correspondent from Oklahoma City. The two people you see pictured together, the one with the glasses is Governor Frank Keating from Oklahoma, and his brother Martin standing next to him. Now, Martin is a writer. He wrote a book in 1988 called The Final Jihad. While doing his book, he was allowed to rub shoulders with Frank's cohorts in the FBI. Now, Frank at the time being second in command in the FBI. He rubbed shoulders with people like Oliver Buck Revell. Now, that man seems to show up every time there's a problem in America, before, during, and after. He wrote the book about various things that had happened in America. For instance, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the demise of the Soviet Union, the bombing of a commercial building in New York, and the flying of a plane into the White House. He wrote all of this before they happened, folks. He also talked about terrorism in the heartland of America, in Oklahoma of all places. But the most heinous thing of all was when he talked about the character that played in this whole role in this book that he wrote. His name was Tom McVeigh. 1988. Wow. Now here from the Department of Defense, drafted July 21, 1994, it talks about the term adversary is used above in its broadest sense, including those who are not declared enemies, but who are engaged in activities we wish to stop. There goes our meeting, folks. This policy does not preclude legally authorized domestic use of the non-lethal weapons by the United States military forces in support of law enforcement. What do they mean by non-lethal? Well, here's the Department or the National Defense Magazine. It's a prestigious magazine. The Journal of the American Defense Preparedness Association, October 1993. In this document, they talk about non-lethal devices slice across the science spectrum. Now, I had Randy, through his computer, make a clear copy so we can show you some of what these items are. It talks about infrasound. Very low frequency sound generators can be tuned to incapacitate humans. In one of our earlier newsletters, we showed a diagram of exactly what they look like so you could recognize them. Causing disorientation, nausea, vomiting, or bowel movements. By adjusting the signal, infrasound can also be used to crumble concrete or masonry. So if they can adjust it to crumble masonry, can they adjust it on us? Would it then be more than non-lethal? They also talk about laser weapons. Low-energy laser rifles with power packs can flash blind people. They call them eye poppers. Blind you for life. And disable optical and infrared systems used for target acquisition. Wow. Now there's a book that we also have available. It's called Perestroika Deception. This is written by a man that defected from the Soviet Union in 1961. He'd been a top official in the KGB, involved in it since the 20s. This man definitely knows what he's talking about. It talks about being educated at the top levels of the KGB Institute, now called the KGB Academy in Moscow. He's been reporting his suspicions and projected activities to the United States CIA so that they could respond accordingly. He talks about the various changes that are coming to the various nations across the earth. It talks about the USSR restructuring. It talks about the same thing for Eastern Europe, the same thing for Western Europe. But for all the U.S. allies to split them away from us. In other words, divide and conquer. Just like they're doing to us, folks, with our religions, or race, or politics, or economics. We need not be split. We all share the same enemy. We need to put it together, folks. But the most dangerous thing of all, it talks about for the United States. It talks about to create favorable conditions for a victory of the radical left in the 1992 presidential elections. Boy, was that radical. Look what we've got. Actually, he and Janet Nero are our best recruiters. Section B under this document talks about to restructure the American military. And boy, have they restructured our American military. U.S. Navy Times talks about the Marines going downtown. Wow. So now America has become super cop of the world. Everywhere you look, they're involved in somebody's face as a so-called peacekeeping force goes over the earth. These are nothing more than mercenaries, private armies murdering for democracy. In the Sun Star, Tuesday, November 12, 1991, it shows the U.S. Army National Guard being involved in a parade. They've got their guns leveled at the spectators. Now, I don't know about you, but I was taught gun safety. You don't point a gun at anyone unless you intend to use it. Yet there's fools in this audience along the streets that are smiling, having a gay old time. Yeah, laughing as Rome burns, right? So here our boys are, rubbing shoulders with the Soviets. They call it the former Soviet Union. Americans and Russians working together in this peacekeeping operation. Now this is a news release from Peacekeeper 95. It was in the Kansas Prairie just last month, where Russian and U.S. troops worked together. They say it's not for release, so let's read it. Plans are underway by the Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Shelley Kashvali, to present the Peacekeeper 95 operation ceremony Tuesday at 10. Well, we know he's part of it, don't we? Talks about their troops being flown in, another non-release. Russian soldiers arrive at McCord Air Force Base in Fort Riley, Kansas. Now this is out of the Army Times, November 13, 1995. Russians and Yanks meet on the Kansas Prairie. Now I'm going to have to put my binoculars on for this one. It talks about, if I can even read it, it talks about one objective of the exercise is to teach soldiers to be flexible in how they handle the situations they are confronted with, and to understand the psychology of civilians on the battlefield, whether they're dealing with hungry women and children or angry militia. This is our army, folks. I don't like the sound of that. What have they trained our children to do against we the people. Now this is Camp Ripley, Minnesota. My wife and I just came through that area probably 2-3 weeks ago on a speaking tour. We spoke to a lot of folks in the area that had witnessed UN peacekeeping forces practicing in Camp Ripley with their blue helmets, with their guard towers with UN symbols and the letters UN on them, with the equipment flying the UN flag and UN stickers on the sides of them. Yet there's nothing going on sinister in America with UN, right? Wrong. This is Operation Cooperative Nugget 95. It went from the first part of August to the last of August. In this operation, they provided a film for public consumption through the media. However, when you analyze closely what they've been up to, they have painted over UN signs that they think you can't see on television. Yet you can look right through their paint, and in huge black letters under the paint you can still see UN. And they tried to hide the UN armbands. They're still there. You can see what they're up to. Now, it was all orchestrated through the Allied Command. According to this document, June 26th of 95, Exercise Cooperative Nugget 95. Now, in this documentation, I'd like to share something that a fellow American has to say. This is the one that sent us the documentation on those towers every 200 miles, those 800 band towers we field. This was sent to a Senator Faircloth. It says this: the American taxpayer provided for the 4,000 troops from 14 Central and Eastern countries, that's Soviet countries, dress uniforms, fatigues, and 2 sets of combat boots. To add to this, we are sending them to Astro World at the conclusion of their joint readiness training to prepare for internal conflicts. The Oklahoma City bombing, the Waco siege, the Ruby Ridge murders, were these considered to be classified as internal conflicts? Is disagreeing with government's actions an internal conflict? Republicans disagreeing with Democratic president, is this an internal conflict? Those of you that watched the movie America with a K, remember near the end of it, it showed our Congress in session being assassinated right where they sat. So far, what they've played out on that movie in 1986 to the year, to the date, has come to pass. What's next for us, folks? It talks about, "It's my understanding that our Old Glory did not fly over these exercises, nor was the national anthem played, or even more importantly, the Pledge of Allegiance was not recited. Some attendees at the ceremony have told me that when they began taking pictures, that the Secret Service came and sat behind them. This is not in the spirit of the American mindset, and is furthering the paranoia atmosphere which appears to be becoming a reality." Now, last year they also had, under the Atlantic Command, a news release called Operation Agile Provider. Just to give you an idea of the troops involved that they're not admitting to this time, the bottom of this first page talks about 44,000 soldiers involved last year that they're admitting to. It talks about the exercise is designed to train forces to operate jointly in command and control, forcible entry, special operations. Wow. Even gives a phone number to talk to these people if you don't believe the documents I have here. So the American public want to know, is our town next? Why are strange military maneuvers taking place all over our country? I don't call it maneuvers. I call it maneuvering into our backyard. Now, this is the document I showed you at the beginning, but I want to read to you the thing that we have highlighted over the UN flag. This is the oath that they take now. "I solemnly swear to exercise in all loyalty, discretion, and conscience the functions entrusted to me as an international civil servant of the United Nations. To discharge these functions, regulate my conduct with the interest of the United Nations only in view, and not to seek or accept instructions in any regard to the performance of my duties from any government or other authority external to the United Nations organization. Wow. We've come a long way, folks. Now, I know some of you may have seen these pictures over and over again, but I'm just going to rub it in a little more. How safe is your retirement fund? The top picture you see are urban assault units, like in what they assaulted Vietnam with as they were leaving, killing people directly with these pieces of equipment. The bottom pictures are 113s and 114s, U.S., but now they're UN equipment. This is taken in Montana. If you could see closer, you'd see the snowy mountains in the background. I'm just going to breeze through a bunch of these. This is the UN Red Cross here in America. This is taken in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the 10th or the 11th of October. This is more of Montana, the top one, the UN helicopter in Billings, Montana, in June of this year. The bottom one is a UN, I guess that's a Blazer. It was at the Office of Crime Control and Public Safety, Emergency Management Division, Area Office, Hickory, North Carolina, November of last year. Now, this was sent from our friends in the militia in Columbus, Ohio, J.J. or Jim Johnson, the man that sat next to me in front of the U.S. Senate. The top picture shows UN Boulevard, United Nations Boulevard. The bottom picture shows the UN symbol and the name United Nations on the public transit system in Columbus. This document is a plane at a remote airport in Arizona with the UN letters across it. The bottom picture is a UN flight simulator that used to be U.S. It now has the UN symbol on it. This is at Shepherd Air Force Base, Wichita, Texas. These are more UN pieces of equipment. Looks like Russian and German stuff from way back. This was going into Texas on I-10 last part of October of this year. Now, this many of you have probably seen. These are chemical command posts or reconnaissance units. This particular picture was Saucier, Mississippi, which they say they brought these vehicles here from East Germany to paint. Well, I think it's cheaper to send a can of paint over there than to send the whole vehicle over here unless their talent has diminished that much. Those same basic vehicles are showing up other places in the country, like Stewart and Stevens, right out of Houston, Texas, 70 miles to the west. Now, it shows these same reconnaissance units, some of which are being changed from Wausau green to UN white at Airmar Resources in the little town of Mississippi, Saucier, Mississippi. Now, this is an aerial photo of that little encampment that says they have just a few vehicles there. They're there by the hundreds, if not thousands, folks, all over the place. That's only part of what we were able to get. So much for their can of paint. This is a bill of lading that miraculously flew over the fence and into one of our hands off the windshield of one of these trucks. It says reserved for the UN. How do they argue that? Every time they're called, they have a different answer depending on which way the wind is blowing. They must be politicians. This is a gal that's been active in politics for quite some time. She's a wonderful researcher from that neck of the woods. Her name is Babs Wilson from Louisiana. She talks about, this is to the Department of the Treasury, U.S. Customs Service. Your Freedom of Information Act request for all information regarding operations of Airmar Resource Incorporated, specifically including shipping records, importation, storage, manipulation, and retrofitting records. Note, Customs considers information of the type you requested to be within the provisions of the Trade Secrets Act. Oh yeah? What secret? What trade? Now, the top photo here is a tank that they say they only have a few of for experimentation and training of our troops with Soviet equipment. That's a Soviet T-72 tank, one of many. This was taken in Texas, one of two tanks that were sitting in a Exxon parking lot. We've had these tanks spotted in Louisiana. As a matter of fact, at Redstone Arsenal, they are refurbishing 3 a day, every day. They have for the last 2 years. and they're being stored at Anniston Army Depot and distributed from there. Why would they restore a weapon or a piece of equipment that they're going to use as a target? It doesn't make much sense to me. Anyhow, that tank that we've had witnesses say are all over this country, and this truck right below it, this reconnaissance truck, and this next photo here are seen side by side. This is a military manual that we picked up. It says Soviet chemical units operate on the move with combat units, thereby preserving a rapid rate of advance even in chemically contaminated areas. This is the first time in history we've had chemical wagons on our soil, folks. What is the intent? Now, while the Soviet T-72 is brought to our nation and roams our soil, we have our M60s dropped in the ocean. 3,000 at a whack. Yet they say that this is obsolete equipment from Vietnam. This was made as late as 1989. I'm sure glad they haven't found my old obsolete car yet. I think it's because a few of our people still know how to run the controls of these machines, and they don't want us using them. Warships just go to scrap. One of our aircraft carriers out in Bremerton being chopped up, sold to the highest bidder, or probably sunk also. This is Soviet missiles here in America. The top one is Virginia, just a couple of months ago. This is a four-tail unit on a mobile missile launcher. The bottom one is one out of Texas, I believe, at a truck stop. It's even got the red star on it yet. They really don't care how bad they insult us, apparently. Now this unit here, may be a little difficult to see, but this is a Soviet Bear bomber. This was at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. This unit is coming into our country now in September of 1994. I witnessed 7 of these units come over little tiny Knoxon, Montana, headed in a north-northeasterly direction. If you ever hear one of these planes, you'll never forget it. They're a counter-rotating turboprop. They have a very narrow fuselage. That's one way to recognize the style, with propellers on it. But they have 2 propellers per engine, not just one. And that's why they sound so low in pitch, like they're growling at you. Now, while that plane lands, our B-52s are being chopped up, folks. The wings are being cut off by a 13-ton guillotine, and the fuselages are being cut in 3 pieces. As they do each one, our people back away, and a Soviet satellite moves in for the photo to verify it. So I guess we don't really have to wonder why we have Lenin in the park, do we? I take this real serious, what's going on with my country. We have black helicopters. We've always heard of this black helicopter stuff. This particular black helicopter is an over-the-horizon chopper. The little dome that's on top can come over the horizon, and that's all you'll see. They can use their hush-hush program. You won't even hear the helicopter. Yet it provides the eyes for at least 6 other helicopters from far distances over this radar system, and you won't even know they're there, miles away, to take care of your city or your water supply or your food supply or whatever it may be. We even had our own taste of this in Little Knoxon, Montana last month. It talked about it was not a hoax. Black helicopters did fly over homes throughout Sanders County Monday night. Sanders County Sheriff Gene Arnold said that the black MH-53S helicopters flew at low levels down the Clark Fork River Valley Monday at 1:03. That's in the morning. Reportedly U.S. Army helicopters from Hurlburt Field in Florida. Wow. Is that an accident or what? Sheriff Arnold said that he discovered that the helicopters had flown directly over the residence of John and David Trockman of the militia of Montana and Knoxon. He became quite upset. That's all we need, for those people to think they're being attacked and have them shoot the choppers out of the sky. Arnold said his office was not notified in advance of the maneuvers, but said that because of the special circumstances that existed in western Sanders County, he would like to have had known so he could have called the Trockmans and advised them what was happening. So what are all these black helicopters doing here, folks? We have a book that we offer. It helps explain it. It's called Black Helicopters Over America, Strike Force of the New World Order. We have a police force in North Carolina. Right below their police department sign, it says, "Welcome, Russian Police." Wow. What's going on there? This was March of '95. This shows a police car in San Francisco, California, but it's just not your ordinary police car. The patch on the door and the patch on the shoulder says Federal Protective Service. I think creeping gradualism is really on the gallop here. This document is from your state of Washington. Here's the sheriff's new squad car. I think that's a 114 armored personnel carrier. While the sheriff's department SWAT team runs alongside in their cami clothes, the tank rolls along to the local neighborhood raid. Now New York is doing theirs a little bit different. Apparently the people can't tell that this is an odd vehicle roaming around. Doesn't this look just like Germany or Russia? This is the bottom picture here is the turret on top. This is a four-wheel drive bash-in-your-door vehicle. And it's also the sheriff's new squad car. This is from Erie County Sheriff's Department, New York, August of this year. So what in the world is going on? When we look at these trucks hauling mobile prison systems around the country, should we be a little concerned, folks? It takes 4 semi-loads to make one prison cell unit. There are 444 loads going to Houston, Texas, 444 loads of these design units going to Walterboro, South Carolina, and 888 going to Rikers Island, New York. Those are the 3 that we've discovered so far. Why? What is going on in our country? This is the Department of the Army, August 29, 1994. This talks about the Army regulations on civilian inmate labor utilization. Here comes the chain gangs. In establishing prison camps on Army installations. For instance, Fort Monroe, Virginia. This is where the documentation came from. Dean Rhodey, Director, Resource Management. Why does that word sound familiar? Now these documents here are the Federal Transfer Center in progress in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. That's been quite some time ago. Now the facility is about up and running. It's located right on the edge of the airport where 747s can taxi right up to, can offload without the passengers ever touching the ground, without you even seeing the passenger. Federal Transfer Center. Now here's a federal detention facility at SeaTac. Will this also be a transfer center? And for what purpose? This is in Seattle, Washington. This is recent, but it's still basically the same design as that same unit in Oklahoma. So we want to know why they've just brought these documents up. This is out of the Billings Gazette, Tuesday, May 24th, 1994. The UN begins work for global gun control? I don't think so. This document is the same basic document that they've already done Canada with. For instance, 5 years ago, if you'd have registered your Barrett Light 50, you'd be having it chopped up today, or you'd be in prison. So much for registering. Communists have said for many years, register firearms under any pretext as a preload to confiscating them. Is this proof or what? Now this is some of the twisted logic in front of the UN building, New York, New York. This statue of a revolver with a twist in it, in the barrel, like a pretzel, is 3 foot by 6 foot bronze sculpture in the front yard of the UN building. But they have no sinister designs, right? So how can they accomplish those things in our country unless some of our lackeys, our public servants, accommodate them. It couldn't happen unless we had traitors within our ranks. This is a Mr. Owens, embarrassing to say, a representative here in America. House Joint Resolution 98. This is what it's all about. Right on the bottom it talks about the right enumerated in the second article of the amendment to the Constitution of the United States shall be construed as the right of the state and not of individuals. Oh, really? Well, it seems like the National Guard of Montana has picked up on that. Join the legendary militia, Montana Army National Guard. Oh, really? We took a picture over there, a couple of pictures, and they came out and got in my face, and they ordered me to leave, and I said, "Servant, I don't leave till I'm ready." He said, "We'll see about that." He left. I got some more pictures and turned around and left. Anyhow, this is how we view it, the second article of the Bill of Rights. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What part of those words, not be infringed, don't they understand? But let's take it a step further. Let's just say that the man from the National Guard, a man by the name of Reed from the Guard of Montana, said that the National Guard is the militia. A well-regulated National Guard, or if we were to take it like this Congressman Owen said about meaning the state, a well-regulated National Guard or state being necessary to the security of every free state, the right of the... Now what are you going to put in there? You can't leave people. To have continuity of paragraph, you have to change that word to either National Guard or state. To keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, let's see how that applies to the first article. Freedom of speech or of the press, or right of the National Guard or state peaceably to assemble? Give me a break. What about the fourth? The right of the National Guard or state to be secure in the person, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated. You see, when they start a lie, they have to continue, and it exposes them every time. Every single time, folks. What about our founding fathers? What built this country? Who built this country, and what was their intent? One of the people that helped to design this Constitution and the Bill of Rights I just read to you was George Mason, 1787. I ask, sir, what is the militia? It is the whole people, except for a few public officials. Former President James Madison, a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people, trained to arms, is the best and most natural defense of a free country. But this is my dearest one of all. Former Vice President Elbridge Gerry. I ask, what is the purpose of the militia? To offset the need of large standing armies, the bane of liberty. Why would he say that? Why would the military be the bane of liberty? Well, I guess you could probably say it depends on whose hands the controls are in. Now this is from a congressman by the name of Scarborough to his colleagues. It talks about the UN. The entity was founded in the flash of victory in World War II, before the clouds of the Cold War began to descend on the world. Much has happened since then, and it is now clear that the United Nations no longer serves our national interests. That is why I have introduced the United Nations Withdrawal Act of 1995. Good for him. Now there's a little more that goes with this. This is House Resolution 3861. It talks about to terminate all participation by the United States in the United Nations and to remove all privileges, exemptions, and immunities of the United Nations. It is called the United Nations Termination Act. This was sponsored June 9th, 1981 by Congressman Larry McDonald. Just prior to him bringing this to the floor of the House, he disappeared on Korean Airline 007. Why? This one here is by Congressman Funderburg. It says, President Clinton. I'll skip over just a bit here. It talks about their unwillingness to participate from Congress. Mr. President, you have ordered Specialist New and other members of the U.S. Armed Forces to participate in the service of the United Nations in the United Nations peacekeeping military operations under actual United Nations Foreign Command. in the former Yugoslavia, also in other areas such as northern Iraq, Somalia. Number 2, deployed members of the U.S. Armed Forces under temporary control of foreign United Nations commanders in such UN operations. Number 3, required members of the U.S. Armed Forces to become UN personnel and wear the United Nations accoutrements or insignias to augment the U.S. military uniforms. Number 4, ordered members of the U.S. Armed Forces to become subject to the Convention on Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, which may supersede the Geneva Convention on POWs and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. What will happen to our boys and girls in the military, folks? What do they have to look forward to? Congress has not been informed or consulted on most of these acts, despite the fact that we have certain clear-cut constitutional duties regarding these matters. Therefore, we request a full legal and constitutional analysis of the jurisdiction of your orders, placing members of the United States Armed Forces under the command of foreign United Nations officers, especially your orders to U.S. Army Specialist Michael New, which is being prosecuted right now or court-martialed for disobeying a direct order. And here are just some of the signatures of the congressmen that support and go along with him. There are 40, I believe there's 41 in addition to him on this object. And these are the departments that he sent it to: Secretary of State, Attorney General Nero's office, U.S. Secretary of Defense, Security Council, Joint Chiefs of Staff. There wasn't one place in Congress or Capitol Hill that he didn't send it, so they can't say they didn't know. Now, this Operation Joint Endeavor, which is what it's called in Bosnia, U.S. forces as part of the NATO enabling force will move into the theater of operation to prepare for entry points for the main implementation force. Enabling forces will move into Croatia, Bosnia, and Slovenia and be under NATO operational control. That's correspondence number 001-B. And it comes from the Bosnia link. So let's look a little closer at this. November 24th, 1995, more than 16,000 service members from all branches of the armed forces will participate in Joint Task Force X-96-1. This is in addition to what's already there, folks. These are some of the support teams, but get a load of these teams. Units of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet, including the aircraft carrier USS George Washington, Battle Group USS Guam, Amphibious Ready Group, elements of the U.S. Army, Airborne Corps, 18th Aviation Brigade, Air Force Air Command, Combat Command, and the Air Mobility Command, Transport, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, Mine, M-I-N-E, Warfare Command, Special Operations Command, Space Command elements, like in satellites, U.S. Coast Guard, Atlantic Area, French, British, and Canadian units. But what really gets dirty is when some of these units prepare for this task. For instance, the 54th Quartermaster Company, Fort Lee, Virginia. Mission: to establish and operate a mortuary affairs collection point and theater evacuation point to receive, process, and evacuate remains and their personal effects. What does that tell us, folks? Now here's another little document I want you to see, just to get the point to home. This is out of the Grand Forks Herald, Sunday, November 26, 1995. The U.S. trying to apply Somalia lessons to Bosnia mission. And at the same time they're doing that, it shows the picture of a casket being carried into a military transport by U.S. troops with a U.S. flag drooped over it. It says, as the U.S. military prepares to enter Bosnia on peacekeeping mission, memories of disastrous missions of recent past are stirred. Wow. This is a map of where the different military branches will be kept. To the far western region, the United Kingdom Division. To the southern and the southeast, French Division, which has Sarajevo in it, of course. To the northern division, it's the U.S. military and their cohorts. when we already know that Sarajevo has U.S. troops in it? For those that are so thankful that NATO is doing it instead of the UN, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is what NATO stands for. On April 4th, 1949, NATO was signed with member groups agreeing that the treaty should be within the framework of the United Nations. The NATO treaty document refers specifically to the UN. The parties to this treaty reaffirmed their faith in the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. So much for NATO. Now we've got here, I'd like to show you, the document of 184 signatures as of November 30th of this year. There they are. 184 signatures of congressmen that said no. Do not send our troops, folks. They went anyway, didn't they? It doesn't matter. Is this executive order we're running under? So they took a vote December 13th, and they gained a few, but it wasn't enough to stop the funding for the ground troops in Bosnia. This is how the vote turned out. The Republicans, 190 of them said no, we don't want money to fund it. Democrats, 20, which totaled 210. But 42 Republicans and 175 Democrats and one independent voted 218 to say we want the money to fund them. This was, by the way, sponsored by Gingrich, the man that gave you House Bill 4079 in 1990 to rescind the U.S. Constitution for 5 years. So much for Gingrich. His bill failed, but the guts of his bill went into the crime bill. I call it the slime bill that the criminals passed. Now this is Senator Jesse Helms, October 30th of this year, second paragraph. I disagree with the premise upon which the UN is built and with the illusions that it propagates. It would be one thing if the UN were just an international sideshow, but it plays a far greater role. It is a vast engine for the promotion of socialism, and to promote this purpose, the United States provides a quarter of its budget. It strikes me that there are enough organizations in this world willing to promote socialism and anti-American propaganda free of charge. And for that reason, I have long called for our country's departure from this organization and vice versa. I hardly agree with the statement once made at the UN by former Assistant Ambassador Chuck Lichtenstein when he invited the members to move out if they did not like the treatment they were being given. In fact, I joined him in waving goodbye as they sailed away into the sunset. Sincerely, Jesse Helms. Hallelujah. So, folks, how far has it gone for us? This is a diagram that shows the normal chain of events of a people that forget what liberty is all about. We go from chains to spiritual faith. Isn't that why our forefathers came here? We go from spiritual faith to courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance. America, the gem of civilization. From abundance to selfishness. Give me, give me, give me. More is not enough. I want it all. From selfishness to complacency. Oh, let George do it. Let somebody else do it. From complacency to apathy. Lethargic. From apathy to dependency. Come on, government, take care of me. That's what you're there for. From dependency back to bondage. Folks, this clock is extremely wrong. The minute hand may be right, but the hour hand's 2 hours off. I take it real serious. And for the most part, this poem that I'm about to read to you called The Final Hours, which was written by Connie Benson from Trout Creek, Montana. Thank you, Connie. It's written to the media. This is how it goes. Where were those who should disclose, who champion a right to know? No media glare, no chance to prepare. Caught off guard by the foe. Why no mention of insidious intention to trash our trusty Constitution? With the truth unveiled of government betrayal, spark a civil revolution? While we were blind with treaties signed that enslaved us to UN domination. Where our powers taken, our laws forsaken, is our country no longer a free nation. Though the risk is great, some don't hesitate to warn of dark days descending, Where tyranny's concerned, better broached than burned. Is our freedom worth defending? Will we heed the signs? Will we halt their designs? Our oppression bravely tender? In the final hours, will we resist wrong powers, or will we meekly surrender? Folks, it's getting mighty, mighty late out there. This presentation that's been called Enemies Foreign and Domestic also has paperwork that goes with it. What I've just showed you is all wrapped up in this documentation right here, about 200 pages worth, to prove to your friends and relatives what's really going on in our country, in addition to the video that'll be made from this presentation. It's extremely serious, folks. We need your help. We appreciate you very much. God bless.
Your mind has been salvaged and you still have truth in sight, and you have not been duped by all their propaganda hype. Will you fight for this country when you know the time is right? Will you fight the peacekeeping forces today? We're gonna fight the peacekeeping forces, the peacekeeping forces. Those ungodly troops will have to pay. Don't you think those light bright blue helmets sure make darn good targets? 2, 3, 4, they stand out like shrimp boats on the bay. There's no more sinister way to attack the USA than to do it the New World Order way. Hey! Now have you seen them flying saucers, or some of them black helicopters flying down low and over my backyard recently? Seen them foreign troops in ninja suits leaving imprints of their combat boots in the meadow down near the neighbor next to me. Heard they're building concentration camps from the rate hike off our postage stamps to protect and defend their great democracy. Though my vote in the last election didn't quite match the same projection, maybe those beautiful talking heads on my TV. And when I called them to complain, and I asked them to explain, they just said that it proves that you're not in the groove of the new majority. Yeah, sure. Well, just between you and me, can't you feel the conspiracy? Can't you sense a hypocrisy, as they call it democracy? Well, it's a threat to your sanity, and not to mention your liberty. And it's all an evil, filthy, rotten conspiracy. Now they've got microwaves and late lights that can see your DVDs. They got chips that fit inside your head that'll make you think their thoughts instead, and drugs that'll make you do just as they please. And to make things